Welcome to Tuesday's Fly of the Week. I've chosen today to tie a Sparkle Dun, which is an adapted fly from Causey and Nastasi, which wrote a book called Hatches quite a long time ago. It's actually hard to find in print these days. And the difference is that Craig Matthews from Blue Ribbon Flies up in West Yellowstone, he took the original fly, and rather than use split tails like you have on the Compare Dun, he put a shuck on the back and he called it a Sparkle Dun. And for the last 35 years I've fished this pattern, and it's still one of my favorite patterns, but today in most shops it's kind of fallen out of favor with a lot of the newer patterns that are out there, yet it is still very effective, especially in pocket water and faster water, because it has a deer hair wing, which makes it very durable, also very highly visible. So the ingredients to tie this fly is, for the shuck we're going to use Zelon, and I prefer Zelon because it's a little stiffer than some of the other materials like Darlon. I also think it's important in your color choice for the shuck here that you use a darker color, because most of your nymphs, especially your betas or even your pale morning dun nymphs, are dark in color. So I like to use a dark olive brown for that. Hair is probably the most important part of this fly, and what I mean by that is selecting the right type of hair. Here I have one coastal deer hair, which is a very short and fine, which is good for smaller threads. This is another piece of hair, which is also very good. And what I look for in this hair in particular is that the ends and the tips don't have long, black, thin ends. That's really hard to tie, and it's also hard, especially for smaller flies, which generally Sparkle Dun is, to get the fly to look the way you want. I'm going to use this little bit lighter hair today just because it's a little easier to see for this demonstration, a little bit easier to use. Some of these hairs, especially when you get coastal, are so short that they're very hard to deal with, and it's a little bit tricky. So this is a very simple fly to tie. It doesn't take very long. First thing we're going to do is put the shuck on. You can also put the wing on first, doesn't really matter. You want to keep the shuck relatively sparse when you tie this in. You don't want it too thick. Just going to tie this in out the back. Just do a couple of loose wraps of thread. Pull your butt ends out from underneath the thread so you don't have to cut any. And I'm going to do a thread body, generally for my smaller flies like a Betis pattern or a bluing olive pattern or a pseudoclone pattern. I'm going to use thread body just to keep it a nice thin profile. One of the problems that I have with a lot of the commercially tied flies these days is the bodies are too bulky when they dub them. They look nice in the bin, but they don't fish as well. You'll find your best Betis patterns anyway, if you tie them either a thread or a biot body, that they'll fish a little bit better because they're super sparse. You notice I took the thread all the way up to the eye and then came back. Whenever you're attaching hair to the hook, you want to make sure you have a base layer of thread, something for the hair to bite into. Again, it's quite a bit of hair that we use, so it's bulky and it's a little bit tricky to get it to anchor in place. So you want to stack it. I used about 25 to 30 pieces of hair here for my wing, counted each one out. The other thing you want to do is when you're preparing your hair, I already cleaned out the butt ends, but you're really not using that part of the fly. It just stacks a little bit better, so it's not as critical. I kind of bunch it in my fingers, so I pinch it between both hands like this to try and get the hair compressed a little bit, makes it a little more manageable when I go to tie it in. I also took the thread, and the thread is just a little bit back of where I want the wing to actually be secured and anchored to the hook shank. And the reason that is because your thread's going to, when you go to attach it, it's going to want to follow this taper of the hair, and it's going to cheat up a little bit. So you want to be a little bit back of that. You want to start with a couple of loose wraps of thread to start with, and pull it tight. You can see the hair start to flare there. Also, as I'm tightening it, I have pressure on the hair towards me, and that helps keep the wings centered on the top of the hook. If I don't push it a little bit towards me and apply pressure towards me, what's going to happen is this hair is going to want to slide around the back side of the hook. Another important step of this is once you get the hair anchored in place, you want to try to cut as much as you can all at once. And you notice I have my scissors here. I have all the hair in the blades. I have the blades parallel to the shank of the hook. And what that does is that's going to give you a nice taper out of the hair for the body. I've got a couple of stragglers here that I'm going to get rid of as well. A couple over here, not too bad though. Now another key here is before you do anything else, you want to lift the hair up, pull it to the back, and you want to jam the thread into the base of the hair. And this also helps anchor it nice and tight to the hook shank, and it won't spin on you. Then push it forward, take the thread, knock down those butt ends, and that'll also help secure that wing. Leave the wing facing to the front of the fly. We're just going to take a little bit of dubbing here, and we're going to cover up what's left of the hair butts anyway. And also, this gives a nice taper to the fly, and it helps separate the abdomen from the thorax. And whether you're tying nymphs or dry flies, I think that's important to do. I don't think enough people really do that. I like to have distinguish the abdomen from the thorax of the fly. So I'm just going to put a very sparse layer of dubbing there, pull the wing back. As you put dubbing into the front, you also want to match the height of the dubbing behind the wing with the height of the dubbing in front of the wing. And the reason that is, it helps support the wing in a more upright position. If the dubbing behind the wing is higher than that's what's in front of the wing, sometimes you're going to see it. The wings on this flies anyway slope forward. And that's it. I'm going to give it a little whip finish here. And we have a sparkle done. When I tie super small flies, you can use deer hair on this, or you can also use, when I start to get flies 20 or even smaller and I like to use this fly, I'll use CEC. Another little thing I like to do is I like to cant my hook shank off about 20 degrees when I'm using smaller hooks, because I think it gives you a little larger surface area and you end up hooking more fish. Lastly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to taper the shuck so it's not square and blunt across the back end of it. So there's your compare gun. Great fly. Easy to tie.